The young and the restless spoilers shock. There are desperate moves, and then there's what Audra Charles just did aboard that luxurious train car bound for Nice, France. In a moment that could only be described as equal parts calculated seduction and career kamikaze, Audra took her shot, bold, theatrical, and dripping in satin. When Kyle Abbott knocked on her door for what was supposed to be a business meeting to finalize the details of their campaign expansion, he certainly didn't expect to be greeted by Audra in lingerie. And not just any lingerie, this was the kind of ensemble that practically screamed seduction, a curated look that belonged more in the boudoir than a boardroom. Her robe slid off with dramatic flair, revealing a woman not only unafraid of using her sexuality but fully weaponizing it in a way that suggested this was never about perfume marketing, it was about power, control, and unresolved longing. But the real twist wasn't the act itself. It was Kyle's reaction. This is, after all, the same Kyle Abbott who once let temptation dissolve his marriage to Summer Newman. The same man who, in the past, would have followed Audra's lead without hesitation, blinded by lust and ego. But not this time. This version of Kyle had changed. Hardened. Sharpened. Scarred by the consequences of his impulsivity. And so, instead of leaning into the trap laid before him, he froze it with a single sentence, calm, cold, professional. He suggested they move the meeting to the dining car. Simple. Devastating. And utterly disarming. Audra had miscalculated. She'd expected Kyle to hesitate, to fall into old patterns. But instead, he deflected her seduction like it was nothing more than a strategic misstep. He didn't flinch. Didn't ogle. Didn't play into the narrative she was trying so desperately to recreate. And in that moment, the dynamic between them shifted. No longer was Kyle the man chasing her approval or succumbing to the heat of past passion. He was now the one in control, and Audra, usually so poised, so untouchable, was suddenly the one left exposed, literally and metaphorically. Still, the tension didn't vanish. If anything, it settled into the space between them like fog over a battlefield, thick, charged, and waiting to rise again. Because Kyle may have walked away from that particular moment of temptation, but he didn't sever the line completely. They were still scheduled to meet later for a wine tasting, under the guise of brainstorming fragrance themes. It was a clever euphemism, the kind that kept their connection ambiguous, flirtatious without commitment, suggestive without action. And that's what made it so dangerous. The passion hadn't died. It had just been caged. The truth is, their history runs deeper than most people in Genoa City realize. Their 2023 entanglement wasn't just a fling, it was a car crash that derailed Kyle's marriage and sent Audra careening from power to scandal. They were bad for each other in the most deliciously toxic ways, and yet, that toxicity still simmers. Every glance, every clipped sentence, every avoidance of eye contact is loaded with implication. Audra might have tried to force the issue, to reignite the physical spark as a shortcut back to power. But Kyle isn't that man anymore. The chaos he helped create with Audra cost him too much: Summer's trust, Harrison's stability, Jack's faith. And while he hasn't forgiven himself, he's certainly learned to protect himself. Which may be exactly why he remains such a target. Audra doesn't fail often. She's the kind of woman who makes failure look intentional, a pivot rather than a defeat. But Kyle's rejection hit harder than she expected, because it wasn't rooted in moral superiority or shame. It was clean. Controlled. Like he had already made peace with who they were, and who they could never be again. That kind of detachment stings in a way no emotional outburst ever could. It says, I remember everything, and I'm choosing not to repeat it. It says, I can want you and still say no. And for someone like Audra, who thrives on ambiguity and tension, that kind of clarity is unbearable. Still, she's not done. She never is. The wine meeting later in the evening isn't just a second chance, it's a recalibration. She'll switch tactics. Maybe soften. Maybe talk about the past with nostalgia instead of seduction. Maybe she'll even bring up Harrison, or Jack, or the cost of their choices, not because she cares, but because she knows Kyle does. She knows how to draw blood without ever raising her voice. And if Kyle isn't careful, the next move won't be about lingerie, it'll be emotional sabotage disguised as reconciliation. Meanwhile, Kyle is playing a different game altogether. He knows Audra's patterns, her rhythm, her weakness for turning emotional chaos into opportunity. And this time, he's not just protecting himself. He's watching her for Jack, for Jabot, for the brand they're about to launch in France. He's already calculating whether Audra is an asset worth keeping close, or a threat that needs to be managed from a distance. His decision not to sleep with her isn't about self-righteousness. It's about strategy. And somewhere beneath that cool exterior, Kyle Abbott is still a man fighting for redemption. The question is, how far is he willing to go to keep himself clean in a world that rewards the dirty? Audra's seduction may have failed, this time. But the war between them is far from over. Their shared history is like perfume on skin, faint, lingering, impossible to fully wash off. And while tonight ended in restraint, tomorrow might bring something else entirely. All it takes is a moment. A sip too many. A scent that triggers a memory. A single look that lingers too long. Because this is the young and the restless, and nothing smolders forever without eventually catching fire. Let me know if you'd like to expand this into the next phase, perhaps Claire catches them together, or Victor uses the tension to test Kyle's loyalty. I can continue the storyline in any dramatic direction you choose. It's one thing to play with people's lives. It's another to finance the destruction of your own family's happiness like it's a corporate merger. But that, apparently, is exactly what Victor Newman is doing. The mustached patriarch of Genoa City, long known for controlling his dynasty with a mix of fear, wealth, and psychological warfare, has allegedly taken his tactics to an unthinkable new level, paying Audra Charles to seduce Kyle Abbott in order to sabotage his relationship with Claire Newman, Victor's own granddaughter. Even for Victor, who once faked his own death to teach his children a lesson, this crosses into a realm so morally twisted that it leaves even his staunchest defenders gasping for explanation. Let's rewind. Audra didn't just spontaneously decide to open the door in lingerie and parade around her private train car like a runway model with boundary issues. That wasn't seduction, it was strategy. The setting, the timing, the wine chilling in the corner, it was all choreographed to perfection. And now, with whispers floating through back channels and social media teasers, the truth is emerging, this was no accident. Audra was following orders. And those orders came from the top of the Newman Tower. What's Victor's endgame? Why would a man who claims to cherish family integrity deliberately pit two of his own against each other? The answer, as always with Victor, is power. Claire Newman is emotionally vulnerable, still staggering under the weight of her father Cole Howard's death. Her connection with Kyle Abbott, fragile and budding, represents a chance for her to regain some sense of normalcy, of love, of hope. And that's precisely what makes it a threat in Victor's eyes. Because hope, especially when it's independent of him, is dangerous. Claire has already shown signs of defying him. She's stepped outside the orbit of Newman control more than once, and now, aligning herself with Kyle, a man who has roots in the Abbott family and whose loyalty has never fully belonged to Victor, she risks slipping away entirely. So Victor, ever the architect of control, decided to strike preemptively. And who better to use than Audra, the woman who once shattered Kyle's marriage with a smile and a glass of whiskey? But here's where it gets even messier. Audra is not single. She's in a committed relationship with Nate Hastings, a man who has been trying to rebuild his career and his dignity after the Ashland Lock disaster. Nate believes he has found stability with Audra. He has no idea she's now dancing on a wire between ambition and betrayal. Nor does he realize that she's been weaponized by Victor as a living distraction. And Kyle, well, Kyle's not exactly off the hook either. He's with Claire now. He's the man she leans on when the grief surges, when the silence of her father's absence becomes too loud. And while he turned down Audra's seduction in the moment, praising his maturity, he didn't slam the door shut. In fact, he agreed to drinks later. That alone leaves just enough room for everything to go horribly, deliciously wrong. The implications are enormous. At best, we have 4 people walking through emotional landmines, all orchestrated by a patriarch playing puppet master in the shadows. At worst, we're looking at the total implosion of trust across Genoa City's elite, Newmans, Abbots, and the extended orbit that binds them. Because the moment Claire finds out, not if, but when, that the woman she barely tolerates just tried to seduce her boyfriend, and did so under her grandfather's payroll, the explosion will be nuclear. Claire has spent her entire life trying to find her place in the Newman legacy. If she learns that Victor deliberately targeted her happiness in the name of some twisted loyalty test or corporate chess match, there may be no coming back. And this time, the pain won't be emotional alone. It will be existential. It will cut into her identity. For Audra, the stakes are equally dangerous. Playing double agent is thrilling when you're in control, but Victor doesn't write checks without strings. If she fails to deliver the outcome he wants, whether that's Kyle in bed or Claire in tears, there's no telling how far he'll go to remind her who's really in charge. And Nate? He may look the other way for ambition once. He might even rationalize a flirtation as part of the business game. But betrayal? Lies? Public humiliation? That kind of fracture doesn't heal with time. It bleeds out. And what about Kyle? He's being pulled in every direction. Emotionally tied to Claire, historically entangled with Audra, and professionally caught between Jabot's future and Newman's interests. Every move he makes now is a move that will be dissected, interpreted, and possibly used against him. And if he stumbles, even slightly, he won't just lose Claire. He'll lose his footing in the corporate landscape. Because let's not forget, Victor never makes a move that doesn't serve a larger business purpose. If Claire breaks things off with Kyle, she becomes more dependent on Victor. If Audra succeeds in compromising Kyle, she gains leverage over him for future ventures. And if Nate finds out, Victor gets to test his loyalty, too. It's not just a love triangle. It's a business strategy masquerading as personal scandal. So what happens next? If Kyle confesses to Claire about Audra's seduction attempt, does he regain her trust, or does he confirm her deepest fears that she'll never come first? If Audra goes rogue and falls back into old habits with Kyle, does she lose everything she built with Nate? Or does she spin it into yet another power move? And will Nate, ever the loyal soldier, start asking questions about why his girlfriend is so cozy with the same man she once destroyed? And Victor, the man at the center of it all. He'll watch it unfold with that stoic gaze, spinning the chaos as concern, painting his manipulation as family protection. But the truth is, this is one of the most twisted games he's ever played, and this time, he may have underestimated just how much damage he's doing to the one person who still wants to believe in him, Claire. Because once she knows the truth, that he paid someone to ruin her fragile chance at happiness in the middle of her grief, there may be no more redemption left. Not for him. Not for Audra. Not even for the Newman name. Welcome to Genoa City, where love is leveraged, grief is monetized, and loyalty is just another asset to be sold to the highest bidder. There's ambition, and then there's Audra Charles. And when subtle seduction fails, the real question becomes, how far will she go to get what she wants? Or more to the point, what she's being paid to get. Because this isn't about lust or unfinished chemistry anymore. This is about Victor Newman's money, Victor Newman's orders, and Victor Newman's expectations. And if Audra's first move failed, she knows one thing with crushing clarity: failure is not an option when you're on Victor's payroll. Not unless you want to be the next pawn swept off the board. So the game escalates. Her initial play, greeting Kyle Abbott in lingerie, slipping off her robe with a practiced toss of the wrist, was meant to be decisive. seductive, effective. But Kyle's refusal, his composed insistence on holding their meeting in the dining car instead of her bedroom, shattered her momentum. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a humiliation. And Audra Charles does not take humiliation lightly. Especially not when her credibility, professionally and personally, is on the line. So if charm doesn't work, then she'll move on to manipulation. The whispers coming out of the train aren't just idle speculation anymore. There's real concern now that Audra may escalate her seduction into something far more dangerous. Drug Kyle? Get him drunk? Manufacture a compromising scenario that never actually happened? All of those tactics are in play, especially for a woman who's already crossed every boundary of ethics before breakfast. Audra has a history. This is the same woman who slept with a married executive and didn't even blink when she was caught. The same woman who used her affair as leverage to claw her way into the inner circles of corporate power. If she was willing to burn reputations for sport back then, imagine what she's willing to torch now that she has Victor Newman's expectations hanging over her like a guillotine. Victor didn't hire Audra to flirt. He hired her to end something. To dismantle Kyle and Claire's fragile, budding relationship before it could take root. To test Kyle's loyalty, prove Claire's instability, and remind everyone, including Jack and Diane, that Victor still controls the narrative in Genoa City. But Audra's failure to seduce Kyle with subtlety has changed the stakes. It's no longer about persuasion. It's about pressure. And Kyle, for all his newfound maturity, is still vulnerable. Still haunted by past mistakes. Still working late nights and drinking wine with the one woman who once destroyed his marriage. That's not just dangerous. That's inevitable combustion waiting for a spark. The setting couldn't be more perfect or more toxic. Kyle and Audra are still together, still collaborating on a mysterious fragrance campaign somehow tied to Kane Ashby, which means proximity. Shared hours. Shared hotel suites. Shared drinks. And Audra, smart as ever, knows that men don't always fall during the grand overture. Sometimes, they crumble during the encore. After midnight. After too many glasses of wine. After the weight of memory and desire settles back in. All she needs is one moment, one lapse in judgment, and the dominoes fall. And what a domino effect it would be. If Kyle sleeps with Audra, even once, it sets off a chain reaction that would rip through Genoa City like wildfire. Claire, already teetering on emotional collapse after her father's death, would be destroyed. The one person she trusted, her partner, her anchor, betraying her in her most vulnerable state? It wouldn't just break her heart. It could send her spiraling back into the trauma she's fought so hard to overcome. And Nate Hastings, completely in the dark, would be blindsided. He's building something with Audra. Or so he thinks. But when the truth comes out, and it always does in Genoa City, it will obliterate any remaining trust between them. And that fallout won't be quiet. Nate may be composed, but betrayal turns even the calmest man into a hurricane. And then there's Jack Abbott and Diane Jenkins, watching their son walk straight into another scandal of his own making. After everything Kyle's been through, losing Summer, losing stability, trying to prove himself at Jabot, falling into bed with Audra again would be a public declaration that he hasn't changed at all. That the man he swore he'd never become is exactly who he's always been. Diane, who's worked so hard to keep Kyle from self-destructing, would be shattered. Jack would be furious, not just at Kyle, but at Victor, for pulling the strings, for turning his son into a pawn. And Victor? He'll sit back in his chair, watching it all unfold like a game of chess he already won 5 moves ago. He doesn't need to say he manipulated Audra. He doesn't need to admit he funded her seduction. All he has to do is let everyone else burn, and then offer them a path back under his thumb. He'll console Claire, offer her a position at Newman Enterprises. He'll remind Jack that family loyalty is fragile. He'll offer Nate a new deal, maybe even throw Audra under the bus once she's served her purpose. Because that's Victor's brand of loyalty, disposable when convenient. But what if Audra goes even further? What if, in her desperation, she manufactures proof? A blurred photo. A staged video. Kyle asleep in bed, shirtless, unaware. A lipstick-stained glass. A pair of earrings under his pillow. There are 1,000 ways to fake intimacy, and Audra knows them all. It wouldn't be the first time someone in Genoa City fabricated an affair to gain leverage. But this time, the stakes are uniquely cruel. Because it's not just business on the line, it's grief. It's healing. It's Claire's last chance at normalcy. And once that's gone, there's no coming back. Still, there's one variable even Audra can't fully control: Kyle himself. He may be vulnerable. He may be tempted. But there's a flicker of resistance in him now, a man trying desperately to be better, not just appear better. If he confesses to Claire about Audra's advances, if he sets boundaries and sticks to them, he could change the narrative. He could be the first man in Genoa City history to break the cycle of self-destruction. But that depends on what happens next. On whether Audra turns the heat up or walks away. On whether Victor gives her more time. Or grows impatient and takes matters into his own hands. The clock is ticking. The wine is chilling. And the night isn't over. Audra Charles is the kind of woman who doesn't quit until she wins, or until everyone around her loses. The only question left is, how much destruction will she leave in her wake before someone finally stops her? And if no one does? Then Genoa City is about to learn that a broken heart is nothing compared to a calculated one.